We are 133 days away from the midterm elections, and tomorrow, New York votes. In a state with 26 congressional districts, exactly one is likely to change hands in November. None of what happens tomorrow will determine which party controls Congress, and yet, by tomorrow night, the Democratic Party may look meaningfully different than it does tonight. Whether that's a crisis or a correction depends entirely on where you sit. Every fault line running through the Democratic Party in 2026, progressive versus moderate, outsider versus establishment, fighter versus folder, is on the ballot tomorrow. And at the center of it all is a 34-year-old man who holds no congressional office, leads no party committee, and is 6 months into his first term as the mayor of New York City. Zohran Mamdani has put his name and his movement behind just 3 congressional candidates running tomorrow. He says the 3 will fight for everyday working New Yorkers, take on corporate greed, protect immigrant communities. So let's take a closer look at Mamdani's chosen candidates and their races. In New York's 7th congressional district, Mamdani is backing State Assembly member Claire Valdez. She's contending in a race for an open seat that covers parts of Queens and northern Brooklyn. In New York City's 13th district, which includes parts of the Bronx and Upper Manhattan, Mamdani is backing the community organizer Daria-Liza Avila Chevalier. She's running against Adriano Espaillat, a 5-term incumbent and the chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He's been described as the informal dean of New York Latino politics, and he spent decades mentoring a generation of Dominican and Latino leaders. The stakes of that endorsement are hard to overstate. But the endorsement getting the most attention is in New York 10, which spans Lower Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn. In that race, Mamdani is backing former city comptroller Brad Lander. But the alliance between Mamdani and Lander didn't start with this campaign. It was forged during last year's mayoral election. Lander and Mamdani were opponents who nevertheless found commonality with each other. And in New York City's ranked choice election with a crowded field of candidates, they made the competitive bet of cross-endorsing one another. Mamdani urged his supporters to rank him as their first choice and Lander as their second choice. Lander urged his supporters to rank him as their first choice and Mamdani as their second choice. That allowance has now followed them here, and what makes it remarkable is who Lander is running against. Dan Goldman came to national prominence when he served as the lead Democratic counsel in the first Trump impeachment hearings. He's now a 2-term member of Congress. Goldman did not endorse Zohran Mamdani's mayoral campaign last year, neither for the primary nor for the general election. He said he was concerned about Mamdani's rhetoric about Israel and the Jewish community. That division over Israel has carried over to Goldman's race against Lander, and it's emblematic of a larger struggling happening across the Democratic Party. Both Lander and Goldman are Jewish and running in a district with a large Jewish population. But they've got very different views on U.S. support for the Israeli government. Lander has called Israel's actions in Gaza a genocide. He supports restrictions to U.S. military aid to Israel, and he vows not to take money from AIPAC. On the other hand, Goldman has been endorsed by AIPAC and has received hundreds of thousands of dollars from groups and individuals affiliated with it. For Mamdani's part, he says the 3 candidates he supports will be partners that he needs in Congress to make New York a more affordable place for working people to live. Joining me now is the Democratic mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani. Mayor Mamdani, good to see you here. Thank you for joining us.
Oli, thank you so much for having me. And, before we begin, I just want to speak directly to New Yorkers. A year ago, you shocked the world. You took a chance on me. And for that, I will be forever grateful. Tonight, I come to you asking you to take a chance again. Now, the names may be different, Daria-Liza, Brad, Claire, but the fight is the same. A fight to reject a broken status quo. A fight to reject a politics of hate, division, and fear. A fight to reject a politics of big money and small ideas, and instead a vote for a city you can afford. A vote for the values that make us proud to be New Yorkers. Tomorrow's Election Day. Let's show them who we are.
So let's talk about the status quo, what you call the broken status quo. I spoke with Hakeem Jeffries last month about these non-open seat primaries, meaning there's an incumbent in them, and the possibility of progressive challenges against incumbents. Listen to what he told me.
Well, we're going to continue to defend every single House incumbent. Ultimately, however, it's going to be up to the people, and that's the reality of serving in the House of Representatives.
So that was intriguing. It's ultimately up to the people, but the party has always backed incumbents. If 2 of your 3 candidates win tomorrow, they will be the first to unseat a sitting Democratic incumbent in the country. There have been 2 Democratic incumbents who have been defeated. That's because they were redistricted into challenging each other. Tell me why you're investing in this.
You know, I think what we see in these candidacies, whether it be of Brad or Dalia Lisa or Claire, is a fight for a vision that has working people at the heart of it. And that is pertinent in our city because we are the most expensive city in the United States of America. And it's also pertinent across the country because we know that no matter where you live, working people are struggling with the cost of living crisis. And in each of these campaigns and each of these candidacies, I see champions who would not only be partners of our affordability agenda in Washington, but also help to lead our party in a new direction where we understand that at the heart of everything we do must be the dignity of working class people that for too long have been in the rearview mirror of the Democratic Party.
Let's work through a couple of these. Dan Goldman didn't just decline to endorse you for mayor. He went on CNN and said he was very concerned about your rhetoric, said he didn't know if he was going to vote for you in the general. And by his own words, he didn't. Is there a personal element to your decision to endorse Lander over Goldman?
You know, the only personal element of it comes from my admiration of Brad and someone that I've gotten to know not only as a colleague but also as a friend. And as you were sharing earlier, we were both running for the same position last year. And yet what we both understood is that if we want to bring a new kind of politics to our city, we also have to embody that. And the two of us joined hands and showcased what it could look like if politics had a little bit more sincerity at the heart of it instead of the typical cynicism that drives so much of it. And Brad is running a campaign where he is showing what it looks like, to use the words of Mr. Rogers, to be a good neighbor. And I can't wait to see someone who's not just had my back, but has had the backs of New Yorkers, whether they're immigrants, whether they're small business owners, whether they're people who are being unjustly detained by ICE, to finally be able to go to Congress and have the back of this entire city.
And Brad Lander has constantly gone to court. He's been arrested for doing it. In fact, he was just found not guilty of those charges a couple of weeks ago. He's called what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide. Dan Goldman will not use that word. He also won't use the word occupation to describe Israel's presence in the West Bank and Gaza. Both of them are Jewish, and both of them want to represent a district with a large Jewish population. So what does that tell us about the future of the Democratic Party, that this has become such a major fault line?
Well, I think for many it's a crisis not only in our politics but also in our morals. And what New Yorkers are looking for are leaders who are able to say that they believe in human rights no matter whom it applies to. And I think you can see that in Brad. It's not just his willingness to name the genocide for what it is or the occupation for what it is. It's also his commitment to actually co-sponsor the Block the Bombs legislation that would stop our country from being complicit as it is in the continued massacring of Palestinians through the Israeli military's bombs. And that's what we want to see. We want to see a new kind of leadership that is willing to chart a path forward, that invests in babies and doesn't invest in bombs.
What happens? You tend to give off an optimistic vibe, so you probably don't want to answer this question. But what happens if your candidates lose? Is there an undercurrent to this whole dynamic that there's some danger doesn't go away after this election cycle? I mean, will you get behind anybody who's a Democratic candidate who wins tomorrow night?
You know, if whoever wins tomorrow night, I'll be there to be a partner with them. What I will tell you is that I've taken all my time and thought about the fact that we could be seeing New Yorkers electing all three of these candidates to becoming the next congresspeople representing our city in the delegation in Washington, D.C. And I think whether you're talking about Brad in New York 10, Dalia Lisa in New York 13, or Claire Valdez in New York 7, you see the opportunity to write a new chapter in our politics. And New Yorkers are hungry for change. And what they see in each of these candidates, whether it's fighting back against special interests looking to buy these kinds of elections, whether it's finally saying that it's time to abolish ICE, or whether it's to send a union organizer to Congress to make sure that the fight for working people is at the heart of our politics, each of these candidates has the answer to so much of what our party has been missing.
Let's talk about New York 13. There has been reporting that Adriano Espaillat, who endorsed you after you won the primary when you were running for mayor, there's been reporting that you said you would endorse him. What happened there?
You know, the promise I made to New Yorkers was to use every tool at my disposal to fulfill the affordability agenda. And one of those tools is to endorse candidates who will help you to be the partner that you need at the federal level. That's why I made the decision to endorse Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier. She is the daughter of a single mother caseworker who has spent her life fighting for working people. And what we've seen in her track record is not just freeing New Yorkers that have been unjustly detained by ICE, but also in standing up and calling for a foreign policy rooted in humanity. You know, I'll tell you, tonight I was walking the streets of her district with her. We ran into a man coming out of a bodega with 2 packets of Huggies in his arms, and he personified what she has often said, which is it's time to vote for a congressperson who's investing in babies, not bombs. The people of New York 13 are struggling to afford life in the nation's most expensive city, and yet what they've seen for so long passing as acceptable politics is spending those tax dollars abroad as opposed to right here in our city.
Let me ask you about the border czar, Tom Homan. He said recently, quote, "You're going to see more ICE agents than you've ever seen in New York City, and it's coming." You seem to have a working relationship with President Trump, and a lot of that has centered around your priorities as it relates to immigration and affordability. What do you make of why Tom Homan said that and what it means?
No, I think we'll continue to see threats coming from the federal administration, whether it's Homan or others. And I think what they need to understand is that our values, our laws, they are not bargaining chips. We are not embarrassed of the fact that we are a sanctuary city. We are proud of that fact. And I've spoken to the president directly, as well as said so in public, that I believe that ICE is a cruel agency that does nothing to further the interests of public safety. It's why I agree with Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier in that we have to abolish ICE. And what we need to do is create an immigration system that has humanity back at the heart of it. You know, I'm the mayor of a city of 8.5 million people. More than 3 million are immigrants, and I'm one of them. And yet what we've seen this federal administration's policies do is wreak havoc across our city. And it's not just on those who do not have documentation. Frankly, it breeds a sense of fear among so many who call the city home, where they don't know if they're going to step out of their home and be profiled purely on the basis of the color of their skin, or if they can actually live the same life that they were hoping to live in this city.
Mayor Mamdani, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time tonight.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Ellie.
New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani.